Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of it. Just like you would have.
When Randolph Scott's life came to an end, many in Hollywood were sad to lose a big star. But his family had another reason to cry. Behind his quiet face and strong cowboy roles was a man who had saved up more money than anyone guessed. The truth is, Scott left behind a fortune so big, it shocked everyone close to him. How did this calm gentleman earn so much? And why did he keep it so quiet? The answer isn't just in his films, it's also in the smart choices, private deals, and the life he kept hidden for years. Join us in this video as we unveil the details. Randolph Scott fortune moves family to tears. For his roles in numerous vintage Western films, Randolph Scott rose to fame. He was frequently portrayed on screen as a silent, tough cowboy who always acted honorably. However, that was far from the true nature of the man behind the camera. He was not just an actor. He was also a very smart investor. He knew how to take care of his money, and he knew how to make it grow over time. Even though he didn't talk about it much, and even though he didn't show it off, Scott became one of the richest men in Hollywood without most people even realizing it. Many actors in Hollywood made a lot of money during their careers, but they also spent a lot. Some lost most of what they earned because they didn't plan well or didn't understand business. Randolph Scott was different. He was careful, he was thoughtful, and he paid attention to the things that really mattered when it came to money. While he was still working in movies, he was already thinking about what would come after. He made quiet, smart investments, often in real estate and in businesses that grew over time. He didn't take big risks, but he also didn't sit still. He was always looking for the right chance to make his future more secure. By the time he passed away in 1987, his family discovered something they hadn't fully known.
The grave of Randolph Scott, star of many cowboy and Western movies.
Scott had quietly built a fortune. It was a large sum, far more than anyone had expected. It turned out that while he was playing cowboys on screen, he was also living like a very clever businessman behind the scenes. His wealth was not loud or flashy, but it changed the lives of his family members in big ways. Many people close to him were shocked by how much he had been able to save and grow over the years. It became clear that he had lived a second life most people never saw, one where numbers and planning mattered just as much as scripts and cameras. When we look at his life in general, it is crucial to know not just the man on television, but also the man who worked off-screen. Thanks to his prudent financial planning, he was able to gather the sum of $100 million then, which helped him retire in comfort and leave a lasting legacy for the people he loved. His story is about more than just acting. It's also about patience, wisdom, and knowing how to plan ahead. What kind of life shaped the man behind the legend just before Randolph Scott gained notoriety for his quiet wealth and astute business sense? Let's take a closer look. The quiet life before and beyond the camera. Before all of this success in investing and saving money, Randolph Scott lived a life that started with privilege, but required hard work and choices. He was born on January 23, 1898, while his family was visiting relatives in Orange County, Virginia. Even though he was born there, his family actually lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. As a boy, Scott had many opportunities. He went to good schools, and he enjoyed expensive sports like swimming, baseball, and horseback riding. He also played football and was very active. He eventually studied at Woodbury Forest School in Virginia, which was a private school known for teaching boys from elite Southern families. It was there that he learned not just facts from books, but also good manners, discipline, and the kind of charm that would later help him as an actor. He got into the University of North Carolina to study textile engineering after graduating from high school. However, he suffered a severe back injury while playing football during this time. His life's course was altered by the injury. He began to lose interest in his studies and was unable to play sports as he once did. He left college and began to look for something else, something more exciting and more meaningful. When World War I broke out, Scott didn't wait long to join the fight. At just 19 years old, he joined the National Guard and quickly became a sergeant. After the war ended, Scott returned to the United States, but he was no longer the same person. He had seen difficult things and wanted to make a new start. He moved to Hollywood, hoping for a fresh beginning. A big turning point came when he met the famous businessman and movie producer Howard Hughes on a golf course. Thanks to this meeting, and because of Hughes's friendship with Scott's father, Scott got a small, uncredited part in a movie in 1929. Scott knew that if he wanted to do more in Hollywood, he needed training. He joined the Pasadena Community Playhouse to improve his acting skills. It was there that he learned how to act for the camera and how to work with others on stage. His talent and good looks soon caught the attention of the famous director Cecil B. DeMille. That was the beginning of Scott's real career in the movies. By 1931, he was already helping other actors succeed. He gave Gary Cooper advice on how to speak with a Virginia accent for the film The Virginian, which helped Cooper look more natural on screen. That same year, Scott signed a contract with Paramount Pictures, one of the major movie studios. He appeared in Hot Saturday, a film where he met fellow actor Cary Grant.
Well, why don't you all drop in here Saturday afternoon? There's lots of drinks and I'll rummage up some food.
The two became very close. In fact, for over a decade, Scott and Grant shared a beach house in Malibu. They lived together, cooked together, and were photographed often in each other's company. Their friendship became the subject of much public interest. Some newspapers and fans wondered about the nature of their relationship, but neither of them ever explained it to the public. They kept their personal lives private and didn't answer the rumors. In 1936, Scott married Marion DuPont Somerville, who was part of the wealthy DuPont family. Marion was very interested in horse racing and lived on a large estate in Virginia. However, their marriage didn't last long. Scott stayed in Los Angeles for work, while Marion lived on the East Coast. They separated quietly in 1939. There were no children from the marriage and no major scandals or public fights. Marion kept Scott's last name for the rest of her life, even after they parted ways. Throughout his acting career, Scott kept things simple and professional. He didn't make a lot of noise in the press. He showed up on time, did his job well, and avoided drama. He was respected by directors and fellow actors for his calm and serious approach. He played many kinds of roles early on, but became best known for his work in westerns, where his strong and quiet style matched the tough, noble characters he played. In the end, Randolph Scott was more than what he seemed on screen. While he played heroes in cowboy hats who solved problems with guns and grit, in real life, he solved things with discipline, planning, and kindness. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He lived quietly, made smart choices, and left behind a legacy that was much bigger than most people realized. When the cameras stopped rolling, what private truth did Randolph Scott leave behind in his final note? Let's find out. The alleged quiet note left behind. After Randolph Scott passed away in the year 1987, when he was 89 years old, something very personal and very private was found among the things he had left behind. It was not a public letter, not something written for the world to see, but rather a quiet, handwritten note, something written by Scott himself. The note wasn't long, and it wasn't filled with big, fancy words. It was short, soft, and deeply emotional. The words in that note carried the quiet voice of a man who had spent many, many years holding a lot of feelings deep inside. The letter, which was carefully folded and tucked away, seemed to be meant for only a small number of people, just a few very close friends or family members. It wasn't something meant for fans or the press. This was something deeply personal and maybe even a little bit sad. When people read it, they felt like they were hearing from a different side of Randolph Scott. Not the actor, not the strong man from all the old Western movies, but just a man who had lived a long life and who had some thoughts he needed to share before saying goodbye. In the note, Scott wrote about how, for most of his life, he had felt very alone. Not because there weren't people around him. In fact, he had many people in his life. But he still felt something missing on the inside. He said that even though he looked calm and strong on the outside, there were times when he felt very quiet and alone on the inside. With time, he had to learn how to hide these feelings. To make sure that no one could see them, he kept them hidden deep inside. That was the way he lived, and it was the way he thought he had to live. He talked a little about how fame, the kind that comes from being a big movie star, came with a price. It wasn't just fun or easy. It could be very hard sometimes. He said that being popular meant that he couldn't always be himself. He had to play a part, even off camera. People always see the need for him to behave in a kind of way, and so he stayed quiet and strong, even when he didn't feel that way inside. He didn't name anyone in the letter. He didn't talk about any one person or give away any big secrets. But he did write about regret, about missed chances and things he didn't do. He mentioned that he sometimes wished he had let people in more. He wished he had shared more of himself, opened his heart more often, and maybe taken more chances with love and friendship. These were the things that, as he got older, stayed with him. They didn't go away, and he thought about them more and more in his later years. What deeper truths were still waiting to be uncovered after that heartbreaking note was found? Keep watching to find out. The heart behind the legend. People had talked for a long time about Randolph Scott and his friendship with another popular actor, Cary Grant. The two of them had lived together in the same house for many years, and people often talked about what their bond really was. Some said it was just a friendship. Others thought it might have been something more. But Scott and Grant never said much. They didn't talk about it in public, and the studios didn't want them to either. At that time, Hollywood worked hard to control how actors looked to the public. Anything that didn't fit the picture was kept quiet. In his note, Scott didn't say anything directly about that part of his life. He didn't confirm or deny anything. But the way he wrote, the tone of the note, felt like it came from someone who had carried a quiet sadness. It felt like the words of a man who had wanted to be more free, to live more openly, but never felt that he could. Maybe he felt afraid. Maybe he felt trapped. Whatever the reason, he said that hiding who he really was became part of his life. It became something he just did, over and over, year after year. He didn't sound angry in the note. He didn't blame anyone. The words were soft, gentle, and full of reflection. He thanked the people who had loved him. He said he was thankful for them, but he also accepted that he had made it hard for people to get close to him. He knew that the quiet, serious, strong picture he showed the world had also built a wall between himself and others. That wall kept people out, and after so many years, he didn't know how to take it down. In movies, Randolph Scott was always the brave cowboy, the calm hero, the man who didn't show too much feeling. People loved him for that. He was very good at those parts. However, it's possible that he also resembled those characters in real life. Perhaps he learned, like the characters, to keep his emotions to himself. The mask may have become a part of him. When the letter was discovered, it didn't make much noise. Newspapers didn't make a big deal out of it. However, it had an impact on the readers. They had no less regard for him. Indeed, a lot of people expressed their increased respect for him, because that little letter showed something they had never seen before. It showed that behind the movie star, behind the strong face on the screen, was a man who had loved, who had lost, who had longed for something more. A man who had lived with a quiet kind of pain, but had carried it with strength and grace. This note didn't give all the answers. There were still things people wondered about, still questions that would never be answered. But the letter gave a small, tender look into the heart of Randolph Scott. It showed a part of him that had stayed hidden for most of his life. And even though it was just a short note, it said a lot. It reminded people that even the strongest people can feel lonely. Even the quietest people can have deep feelings. And even someone as famous and admired as Randolph Scott could carry a burden no one else could see. That note, simple as it was, became part of his story. It added something human to the legend. It made people look at him not just as a Hollywood star, but as a man, a real man, who lived, who felt, who kept some parts of himself locked away, and who, in the end, found the courage to speak from the heart. What was it about Randolph Scott that made him stand out and become a lasting figure in Hollywood's Western world? Stay tuned for more. Randolph Scott, as the quiet legend of classic Western films. Randolph Scott was a well-known actor in American movies. He became very famous for his roles in Western films. These are movies about cowboys, the Old West, and adventures in wide open spaces. Scott was known for being calm, strong, and confident on screen. He acted in many films from the 1930s through the 1950s. People who watched his movies liked how he showed a quiet, brave kind of hero. He worked very hard and was professional in how he did his job. Many other actors and directors respected him for this. Scott helped make the Western movie style popular in America. In his films, he often played characters who were honest and tough. These characters were the kind of cowboys people wanted to see, brave, fair, and steady. Over many years, Randolph Scott acted in a lot of Western movies. Some of his films, like Ride the High Country and The Tall T, are still remembered as some of the best Westerns ever made. Scott was good at showing feelings without saying much. This made his characters feel real and interesting. Later on, Scott did not like to be very public or in the spotlight outside of his movies. He was a private man who kept to himself. Even though he was quiet about his personal life, his work on screen left a strong mark. People still think of Randolph Scott as one of the greatest Western movie stars. His films helped shape the way many people think about the Old West in stories and movies. His legacy in American film is important and lasts even today. Long before the quiet rumors began, and even before the seafood lunches and magazine stories, something quietly began to grow between them. Randolph Scott may not always be the first name people mention when they talk about Hollywood legends, but his legacy is quietly powerful. Over the course of his long career, he starred in so many films, most of them Westerns, where he became known for playing strong, stoic, and principled characters. He wasn't flashy or loud. He let his quiet confidence and calm authority do the talking. That made him stand out, especially in an era filled with big personalities. His work helped define the classic American cowboy image, and even though he kept his personal life private, the mystery it only added to his legend. Today, he's remembered not just as a movie star, but as a symbol of quiet strength and lasting impact. What was it that first brought Cary Grant and Randolph Scott so close? Keep watching to find out more details. Shrimp recipes and shared secrets. Back in the spring of 1933, a young Cary Grant, who was still becoming a star at the time, spoke to a fan magazine. He was asked to talk about something light and fun, his favorite fish dishes. The magazine, called Modern Screen, had a regular column called The Modern Hostess. It was aimed at housewives, and it usually shared recipes that were supposed to be foods men liked to eat, especially dishes that male celebrities were willing to talk about. That issue followed the usual pattern. But when it came time for Grant to offer his best advice on the topic, he surprised the writers. Instead of focusing only on his own tastes, he brought someone else into the conversation. If you want to talk to a real authority on fish, particularly shellfish, you ought to get a hold of Scotty sometime, Cary Grant said. That lad's a hound for lobsters and crabs and shrimps and such. Scotty, of course, was Randolph Scott. The magazine made note of it. That fall, only a few months later, the two men were interviewed again, this time right after they finished 18 holes of golf. They were having lunch together in Los Angeles, and Randolph Scott was the one who ordered the food for both of them. The article was like many others at the time, but also very different. In the 1930s, during the early days of sound movies, Magazines like Modern Screen were a key part of how movie studios tried to shape the public image of their stars. Paramount Pictures, which had both Grant and Scott under contract, used these types of interviews to make the actors seem more relatable and likable to fans. These magazines gave fans a look behind the curtain, or at least what seemed like a peek into the stars' personal lives. But this particular feature stood out. For two young, handsome actors to share the spotlight in a story about lunch and seafood recipes? That wasn't usual. It wasn't common for two single men living together to take part in a story like this one, especially not with such warmth and openness. During the interview, Grant gently encouraged Scott to describe how they liked to cook crab meat chow mein, one of their favorite meals. Scott proudly said that he had even changed Carrie's food preferences. In his words, "I've even gotten Carrie eating shellfish with the same enthusiasm as me, you'll notice," Scott said with a smile. The way they talked and joked together sounded very much like the way couples were often written about in fan magazines at the time. It wasn't long before people began to wonder if there was something more going on between the two men, something more than just friendship. Not everyone was kind about the rumors. One well-known Hollywood gossip writer, Hedda Hopper, hinted at her suspicions more than once. She wrote things that made fun of Grant and questioned whether he was normal. In one letter, she bluntly asked, "Whom does he think he is fooling?" From the very first day they moved in together, people whispered about their relationship, and they didn't just live together for a short while. They shared homes, on and off, for nearly 10 years. During that time, both men went through marriages, but still kept returning to each other. As time passed, more stories began to surface. A few men came forward and claimed they had romantic or sexual relationships with either Grant or Scott, or both. Others said they had seen real love between the two, not just friendship. At the same time, many people who knew them insisted that they were just close friends, nothing more. The truth is, we may never fully know what really happened between them. Life for gay men in America, especially before World War II, was incredibly difficult and very hidden. Being openly gay wasn't just frowned upon, it could destroy your career, your reputation, or even send you to prison. So people stayed quiet, even those who were deeply in love. Because of that silence, different biographers have come to very different conclusions. Some believe Grant and Scott were romantic partners. Others don't. But the truth may be less about labels, gay, bi, or straight, and more about the deep connection the two men had. What mattered, in the end, was not just the rumors or the headlines. It was how they looked at each other, how they talked to each other, how they cared for one another. At least one person who knew them said that Grant had once called Scott the love of his life. Most accounts of their relationship, whether in books or documentaries, have focused on magazine photo shoots or flirty headlines. But if you look closely at the actual content of those old articles, and then add in the later testimonies from people who knew them, a much clearer and more touching picture starts to appear. But as their friendship kept drawing attention, was there more to their bond than anyone dared to say? Let's find out. Light in the shadows of old Hollywood. It was a relationship full of shared homes, shared meals, and shared jokes. Maybe it was romantic, or maybe it wasn't. But it was close, and it was real. So why would Paramount, a big movie studio, let two of its most promising young stars appear in a cooking column together, just when gossip was starting to spread? That question still puzzles some people. Back then, even a small rumor could ruin an actor's career. Writer Anthony Slide explored this puzzle in his 2010 book, Inside the Hollywood Fan Magazine. He said, "It was all very odd, not the least because it was all very open." The two men didn't try to hide much. Maybe the readers just didn't see what was in front of them. Maybe the honesty was so obvious that nobody believed it could be anything more than friendship. Slide continued, "The two men, the writers, and the readers were either incredibly naive, or the actors were willing to risk the readers not guessing the truth of the relationship. Perhaps it was the sheer transparency of the couple's life together that kept it from ever becoming identified as a homosexual relationship. In other words, the fact that they lived so openly, so comfortably as roommates, may have been what protected them. People saw them playing golf, going to lunch, laughing over seafood recipes. It seemed safe. But through all that publicity and surface-level storytelling, a more intimate story still managed to come through. It's clear that they influenced each other, trusted each other, and felt at home with each other. The Hollywood machine, which tried so hard to create illusions, accidentally gave us a glimpse of something real. Before he ever met Randolph Scott, Cary Grant had been through a lot. He was born in England as Archibald Archie Leach.
But that image of actor Cary Grant was carefully crafted by Cary Grant himself.
His childhood was painful. His father drank too much. His mother was often deeply sad and later sent away to a mental institution when Cary was just 11 years old. After that, things only got harder. Cary was eventually kicked out of school because of his behavior. At 15, he ran away from home to join a group of performers. That decision led him into the world of vaudeville, and later, into Broadway and Hollywood. But before he became a famous movie star, he did whatever he could to get by. He walked on stilts outside theaters. He worked around Coney Island. Slowly, step by step, he made his way toward success. In the 1930s, Los Angeles had a secret nightlife for people who couldn't be themselves in public. Even though being gay was illegal, underground clubs offered a place where men and women could be free, at least for a little while. One 1933 article mentioned places like BBB's Cellar, where the boys dress up like girls, and Jimmy's Backyard, where the girls dress up like boys. These weren't just clubs, they were safe spaces. And people like Cary Grant and Marlene Dietrich were said to be part of that scene. Randolph Scott and Cary Grant were part of that world too. Despite the risks, they chose not to hide completely. They were seen together, often. According to biographer Mark Elliott, the two even showed up at costume parties dressed in women's clothes. In April of 1933, the magazine Photoplay ran a short blurb that said, "Randolph Scott and Cary Grant carry this buddy business a long way. They go to every place together and even share the same house." The rumors were right there, in print, but somehow people looked the other way. Maybe they didn't want to believe it. Maybe it didn't matter to them. Or maybe Grant and Scott were just brave enough to live in the light in their own quiet way. They found something in each other. Something that lasted longer than a simple friendship, or maybe even longer than love, as most people understood it. Whether or not the world knew what to call it, the bond between them was real. It was hidden, but not hidden at all. It was right there, in the pages of fan magazines, in the shrimp recipes, in the laughs shared after a round of golf. And somehow, even through the fog of old Hollywood, we can still see it. What do you think about the legacy Randolph Scott left behind? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.